Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the news and politics show for the Hoosier State without all the bad faith BS, both sidesism, and false equivalency. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. We've got a great panel with us today. Very important one big thing topic in the last third of the show. We are going to discuss the RFK/Trump announcement regarding autism and Tylenol on Monday. I've got three guests with me, all of whom have very personal relationships with the autism community. So I'm looking forward to a very important conversation there. But first, we're going to go around Indiana and talk about Hoosier headlines and then zoom out and look at what's going on in the rest of the world before we get there. So, first, a little bit of quick housekeeping. Do be sure to subscribe to Project Next on YouTube, Facebook Live, or Twitch, or whatever platform you're watching us here today. And also check out Project Next Movement on the social medias. That is their handle on most of the places. Great stuff down here in Southern Indiana. All the news without all the fear, hate, and division. Great folks at Project Next. Tim Peck, one of the co-founders of Project Next, medical doctor, by the way, should be popping in for that One Big Thing segment. Looking forward to seeing him at that point. Finally, before we move on, be sure to follow me on social media at Who's Left, and my website is who'sleft.us. We put out a podcast once a week in addition to this show. Be sure to give us a listen. All right. Enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let us move on to our show and welcome in our guests today. First, coming back to the show, one of our favorite returning guests is Jennifer David. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad to have you here today. I would not want to have this discussion without you.
That's good, because I haven't actually talked with anybody about some of the things that we're talking about today. So this will be my first chance to get my thoughts out.
Excellent. Well, I am so glad you're here to share your wisdom with us. And I am also glad to have Dr. Michael Shaffer here with us. Now, Dr. Shaffer's been with us on the podcast a couple times before, but it's his first time here to the panel. Welcome. Dr. Shaffer has trained over 1,000 principals in Indiana.
Kind of scary, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. If you've gone to school in Indiana, chances are you've had a principal be trained by Dr. Shaffer. And as such, you also have to interact with, the disability community and autism and all those things. So I'm really glad to have you here and your unique perspective on these things as well. Finally, let's welcome back Leslie Nuss up in the region there, Northwest Indiana. Hello, Leslie. You're looking awfully cool today.
Hi, Scott. Thanks. Yeah, it's really nice to be here. I really appreciate this. Is going to be a good panel today.
Yeah. And you also have a personal story here.
Definitely. I have a son with Down syndrome and autism, so it's very it's big on my mind.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in the last third of the show. Not just news. We're going to get personal in that segment. So stick around for that. But first, let's talk about this week in Indiana and take a quick trip around the corn. So first of all, quick in memoriam here to Nancy Leonard, the first lady of the Indiana Pacers, who passed away recently the other day at the age of 93. She was the wife of the former head coach and general manager, Slick Leonard. Saved the team in the 1970s. These two folks are responsible for us still having the Pacers here in Indiana. So condolences to their family. Also, let's move on and talk about a couple quick things that happened in the state this week in government and politics. So at an interim study committee on public health, behavioral health, and human services on Thursday, a dozen folks spoke regarding the state's improving maternal mortality rates. Great. Yay. For a long time, Hoosiers have had one of the worst mortality rates in the wealthy world for all new mothers, especially Black mothers. And similar racial disparities exist for newborn children. However, the state has made strides lately when it comes to infant health, reporting the lowest mortality rate since the state started gathering data 100 years ago. Yay.
Wow.
But the state
That
has
data's
deeply
from
cut
when?
funding for programs with public health departments that were working to improve infant and maternal health outcomes. Facing a budget crunch, Republicans chose to cut funding for this program after just 2 years, disrupting the biggest investment in public health in decades. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if these improvements continue, or if these cuts are going to, send us back in the wrong direction. In another panel, a group from the Indiana Department of Corrections told the state's interim study committee that the agency's incarcerated population rate is at 95% capacity.
Oh,
So
wow.
our prisons are getting quite full. On the prison front, also, the Indiana Parole Board on Wednesday recommended against granting clemency to death row prisoner Roy Lee Ward, setting up a final decision by Governor Mike Braun about 2 weeks before his scheduled October 10th execution date. We've also had a lot of state hearings this week. The public retirement system is nearing funded status, so that's good. The Indiana public retirement system oversees nearly $55 billion in assets for a little over 500,000 members across 16 accounts. The overall funding status of the system increased from 81 to a little more than 83%. Last year, the largest unfunded liability continues to be the teachers pre-1996 defined benefit account, which has $3 billion in unfunded liabilities, which the state budget dedicates around $1 billion annually to pay down. That should be fully funded by about 28 or 29, depending on market conditions. So good news there. Mixed news finally out of Leslie's neck of the woods up there, where in Gary, Nippon Steel, which recently purchased U.S. Steel, has announced plans to spend about $300 million to revamp the largest of 4 blast furnaces that still operate at the Gary Works. They're going to be doing that next year in 2026. Nippon Steel has promised to spend over $3 billion on the plant in Gary as part of an $11 billion investment promise on all U.S. steel plants still operating in the United States. Okay, so good investment going into Gary. However, this is a coal-fueled furnace that they're going to revamp and keep using for several years to come. So a lot of local folks aren't happy about that. So we will move into our deeper stories here shortly, but before we do any of those quick headlines really catch your eye? Leslie, I'm going to start with you on that U.S. Steel, or well, I guess it's Nippon Steel now, that story up in Gary. Mixed bag?
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag. I mean, of course, we want investment in our state and we want people to have jobs, but we also, I mean, the jury has, made a verdict. We need clean energy, and clean energy is renewable, the sun, the wind, and it doesn't cause cancer. And it is ridiculous that the sane heads aren't prevailing here.
Leslie, you're making an excellent point. When we have the ability, we have the space. We have a lot of wide open spaces in this state where we can do those things. I know at least 2 school districts that have put in solar fields. So and I'm thinking, the sun doesn't always shine that much, but wow, what a great investment on their part. And they have just done incredible things with that. And it's exciting to see that we don't have to do everything the way we've always done,
And this energy source is not new. I mean, they had windmills in Holland, right? In the
That's right.
1500s and before. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's a big money, thing. Oil and gas have lots of money to promote their own issues, but I always think about, Dr. Seuss and the Lorax, like,
Yes.
what do they want? To make a scorched earth? This is a beautiful state. It's a beautiful planet, and we can do better.
Absolutely. Jennifer, did anything catch your eye in those quick headlines that you wanted to point out?
I think, yes, actually, a couple of them. The first one that you had talked about, gosh, I'm having a brain fart here. Nancy. Just
yes.
her legacy, just for women. Actually, I just kind of want to look at her story and then, our maternal rates, but she definitely was a trailblazer. I used to live in Indianapolis, so it's a lot different where I live in Southern Indiana, where it's like college. College basketball is really popular, but, in Indianapolis, the Pacers, they are the home team. And she really did work really hard we almost lost them when they changed over to the NBA. So she is a very important part of the Pacer story, Indianapolis story in Indiana. So I just want to make sure that we have a moment to talk about her. And that's just the exact opposite of the other story with the maternity rates, maternal wellness in Indiana. First of all, this information is from 23, I think. I'm not quite sure, but it's obviously not our current administration.
Yeah, it's a couple years behind. Yeah.
Right. So, and a lot of that is state, but a lot of that also comes from the feds. So it will be, I do not anticipate that that's going to continue to improve. I would anticipate that it would backslide. And as you've already pointed out, that the improvement is really not there for Black and brown families either. So that's something that we definitely need to be watching out for. And I don't see that getting any better either.
Yeah, you make a good point there, Jennifer. Whenever any of these policies that really affect people's quality of life go into effect, obviously minority communities and other folks that are poverty stricken typically feel the effects first.
Right. And that also leads to more illnesses, more disabilities, and more, drain on our money. And, I'm sure you've already talked before about the rural hospitals, around the state closing, and it just all goes together.
That's really a theme that just comes up over here again and again, Jennifer, is that, we like to put Band-Aids on things in this state and, larger in this country, rather than dealing with things upstream, because it's maybe not as effective, but it's certainly more profitable. So let's move on to our deeper stories this week. And, I'm glad I've got Dr. Mike here for this one, because we've been following the continued attack on public education in Indiana. And so in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, it has been a very, very fruitful situation for the far right to mine for rage. And Todd Rokita has certainly been one of the guilty parties advocating for the removal of teachers who said mean things about Charlie Kirk in the aftermath. So here, I've got a story here. This is it's from the Indy Star via Yahoo News. So Rokita sent a letter offering legal guidance to school superintendents and public university administrators on Tuesday, claiming that schools assume substantial authority to remove or discipline teachers who make divisive or controversial speech. Previously, Rokita asked people to report teachers who celebrate or rationalize, those were his words, Kirk's September 10th killing, so they can be included in his office's government dashboard. That is called Eyes on Education, and he introduced this dashboard earlier in the year, but before this Kirk assassination, just to spy on teachers, doing such controversial things as displaying a pride flag in their classroom. The horror! So Rokita continues, he says, as a matter of good government and sound public policy, schools would be wise to remove from the classroom teachers who express support for or attempt to excuse political violence. And as a matter of morality, this moment demands decisive action from public officials to address noxious speech from government employees that undermines public confidence in our schools and corrodes public discourse. Now, Rokita adds that educators can exercise First Amendment rights, but those rights are not unlimited when it comes to government employment. Governor Mike Braun has also expressed similar thoughts, stating that the Secretary of Education can suspend or revoke a teacher's license for misconduct. So, Dr. Mike, let me get your thoughts on this. I put it on a tee for you. Smash this thing out of the park.
Great job. First, the thing that I really want to say is that the state has indicated a really strong lack of support for public education and for anyone involved in public education. And I think that is one of those things. When you were reading earlier the news about the prison population being at 95% full, and we're building, you can look, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but it's my understanding that you can compare attendance rates and graduation rates, and it correlates to the numbers that go into prison. It's the school to prison pipeline. And I know so many teachers that are fighting so hard not to lose students. And when I say not to lose them, I mean, we make promises to ourselves, to our parents, to our communities, that we are going to be here. We're not going anywhere. We are going to educate all students. And we're going to educate all students to the very level that they need to be. And that means that we're going to take care of making sure that we identify students with special needs, make sure that we provide the services for them. And then we don't just forget about them once they get up to third or fourth grade because they can read. We're going to say, let's make sure we provide for them the things they can read that will keep their imagination trapped, and that they want to read and they want to go, because it opens new worlds. And so, there are a lot of political things I could say. I actually teach politics. But the one thing that I always tell students is that you have to understand that politics is not evil. That's a hard concept. And I start with that, and they look at me and I say, politics is not evil, it just is.
Right.
Period. I mean, politics is always going to be there, and it's competition for scarce resources. I didn't create that definition. Somebody did, and I've never been able to trace down who said it, that politics is competition for scarce resources. We here in our state have decided that we're going to fully fund private religious schools. And when we do that, and to the tune of about $500 million a year. So we right now have spent $2.6 billion on private religious schools. And the last count that I got, it was 97.8% of them were religious. Now, separation of church and state, not in Indiana. And we're paying for it in the public schools because we are struggling in public education with funding because that money is being diverted.
Yes.
So I don't know that I really answered your question. The freedom of speech thing, and I will say this, the same thing I tell my students. There are limits to what you can say, and good sense has to prevail. There are things you don't talk about, and you make clear when somebody asks you, I'm not really the person to talk to about that, because my job is training leaders, and I have the privilege. I had a 25-year career as a principal. I had the opportunity now to train principals and school superintendents, and I get to encourage them to think about things before they talk.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, teachers are still people, right? And
Absolutely.
you still get to do the things regular people do in their off time, and so if you have your social media and you post something, I mean, like, Rokita and Braun and the Republicans in general are really conflating any mild criticism of anything Kirk said with excusing political violence. Leslie, you said one of these teachers in Indiana. I got another link here in our notes that says, in addition, there were some public workers like a DCS employee, somebody from the Muncie Human Rights Commission resigned. And as of September 17th, in the article I cited, 3 school districts had parted ways with teachers following their comments about Kirk's death. It may be more since that time, but you said one of them was in your school district, yeah?
In Valparaiso, yeah. She had made a post on her private Facebook page, and somebody had screenshotted it. And it really wasn't a bad post, but, I think that this is a power flex. And it also reminds me of, I lived in New York City during, September 11th, and some, business owners used that as an excuse to fire people. Oh, well, we can't keep you on because, we don't know what's going to happen. And it's just, looking for a reason to do what they want to do. They want to put some terror. They want to make people miserable. And, there could be more nuance, but, obviously it was a horrible death, and he didn't deserve what happened to him. But he also was very inflammatory in a lot of the things that he said. And, he put teachers on a watch list, and teachers received death threats. And so, that his free speech was protected. So, I just think it's a really difficult thing, because
and Leslie, I'm going to agree with you. I think all of us, and I served in the military before, while I was beginning my teaching career. I was in the Army National Guard, did military intelligence, if you can believe that. That's kind of the oxymoron about that it's military and intelligence. But the thing with schools and with free speech is that we have to recognize that our free speech is tempered by the fact that people look at us as being educated, and also hopefully thinking before we say things. To me, I can say anything I want when I'm talking to my friends, but I'm going to be careful when I speak, if I'm speaking publicly, if I'm speaking on a podcast or whatever, because I know that I am employed by the state. That's the reality.
I agree.
Yeah, Jennifer, I want to ask you about this one, because so listen, I'm going to read you a quote. And this is from a Ball State employee. Her name was Suzanne Shevertz, and she was, until recently, the director of health promotion and advocacy at Ball State's Student Affairs Division. She says in a social media post, quote, "Let me be clear. If you think Charlie Kirk was a wonderful person, we can't be friends. His death is a tragedy, and I can and do feel for his wife and children. I believe in the resurrection, and while it's difficult, I can and do pray for his soul. Charlie Kirk's death is a reflection of the violence, fear, and hatred he sowed. It does not excuse his death, and it's a sad truth. The shooting is a tragedy, and I can and do feel for a college campus experiencing an active shooter situation. The deaths of Melissa and Mark Hortman, the children shot and killed in Minneapolis last month, and the children shot in Colorado today, the same day as the Kirk assassination, are all tragedies that also deserve your attention. Charlie Kirk excused the deaths of children in the name of the Second Amendment." End quote. Jennifer, was there anything fireable or even offensive there?
I'm not going to go there, because honestly, what I see in this, that part of the problem is that we need to have better ways of coping and dealing with and talking about the things that are going on around us, is part of the reason why this has happened. And then people are coming on and, using social media, and that is very destructive, and it just kind of leads back into this cycle. So I have not spoken a lot about this, and I'm not going to. We all have our opinions, but again, if we are just focusing on this, we're not talking about the underlying reasons why any of this is happening and why we feel the need that we need to put everything on social media, why we need to tell people they can't have free speech. I mean, it's like this with so many things that are going on with this administration, right? The whole autism that we'll talk about later, that's covering up other things. So really, we've got to be able to pull away things and get to, the root of what is going on here. And these really start in our communities.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of another thing going on in some of our communities, this is something Dr. Shaffer and I have talked about in his previous podcast appearances. So down in, I want to say, Floyd County, LifeWise Academy is beginning programs there. Now, this is an Ohio-based nonprofit that provides released time religious instruction that takes children off campus out of their regular school during the school day and allows up to 2 hours of weekly off-site religious education. And this it goes back to a 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision, and there was a 2024 Indiana law that they passed to explicitly allow this sort of thing in our state. Last year, according to the Indianapolis Star, LifeWise planned to operate in 52 counties during last school year. By this fall, the Indiana Citizen confirmed the group has at least one participating school in all 92 counties, with ambitions to add more sites in each. Dr. Mike, give us the quick overview of this LifeWise Academy and what they're all about.
Okay, so I am so glad you brought this up, Scott. The number one rule of politics always is follow the money. Now, let's talk about the money at LifeWise. Now, I'm not talking separation of church and state. I'm just talking money. Last year, they had revenue of $35 million. Now, let that sink in for a minute. And then they had expenses of about between $14 and $17 million. So the rest of that was just, where did it go? Interesting. So, but they're not accountable to anybody. And they come to schools and they convince a parent, because a parent has to request it. That's the rule. And they say, we'll make a deal with you. We will do the background checks. And all you have to do is let us pick your children up in our big red bus. We'll take them off site. We'll be responsible for them. We will teach them lots of things, which, by the way, are very narrow and very offensive to most of us. Wow. Then they come back to school and they talk to their friends about the ice cream that they had and the parties that they had, and they try to evangelize and proselytize the other children who do not go. And so this group is not harmless. Here's the big thing, and this is something every school district should be very aware of. When you work as a school district, you are absolutely responsible for the well-being for the children from the time they leave their residence in the morning until the time they get back to their residence in the evening. That's Indiana law. And it's called in loco parentis. We act in place of parents. Now, I teach school law, I tell students, you could have your teachers do permission slips, but the parents do not have the right to sign away the rights of a child, period. That's the law. So you can sign it, but a permission slip is not really worth the paper it's written on. Here, when we're talking about a group that school districts do not control, that is a problem to me, because as a school leader, we do background checks on any person that has contact with children. If you want to volunteer to come in and read with a kid, you're going to get the full-blown records check.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the problem. LifeWise says, we'll do the reference checks. It's no problem. Then we find out the reference checks they do are not nearly as extensive as the ones the school districts do. And before they will release that information to the school district that they did the reference, supposedly did, and I say that very intensely, supposedly did, they tell the school districts it's up to the individual whether they want to give you the results of their reference check or not. Oh, wait a minute.
That sounds, yeah.
No. The purpose of a reference check is to make sure that we have safe individuals who are not child molesters or not anything else. And sometimes people say, hey, it's a religious group. It's from the church. We don't have to worry about them. And I say, you know what? There's a worldwide church that's very well known that has spent billions of dollars in reparations because of what they did, what individuals did to children. So just because it's a religious group does not give me any peace of mind. In fact, it says to me, look, I know the rules that come from Zorak versus Clausen, the one that you're talking about, the 1950, whatever, 1952, I think. And it says that school districts shall not give money, it can't be on your campus. And so that's really about the big thing. It can't be on your campus. You can't contribute to it. All right, so let me explain something. People say, well, Doc, what about if a school district pays for it, then they're supporting that ministry. And I said, let me explain something to you. If you don't do those background checks as a school district, I don't care what they say they have done. You are liable. You are 100% liable. Let's say the bus driver that you don't even know if they have a CDL, bus transportation license. It could be, all right, it's a good guy. He's a farmer. He lives down the way. I'm not using farmers in any kind of negative way. I'm just talking bus drivers, and I love bus drivers. But in this situation, what if the bus driver gets sick and they have to pull in at the last minute some other bus driver? How do we know that bus driver has a background check? That forces us to be entangled, which used to be the rules we followed, the Lemon test, Lemon versus Kurtzman. So they say we're going to provide the background checks, but it's up to the person whether they tell you, sorry, no go. If you're allowing them into your school, which the state law says you have to do, it does not say that you cannot require a background check. You have the ability to require a background check. And you need to exercise that ability. Because if you don't, and somebody who abuses children has a record, then you've got a problem. You've got a serious problem.
Yeah.
And that means if they're taking them to a church, I am not speaking out against churches. I'm just saying this is the way it works. If you take if LifeWise takes your children to a church and somebody happens to walk in the door, you know what happens when they come to a school? They have to ring the bell and somebody says, yes, may I help you? And you have to tell why you're there. You don't get released just to wander through the school, ever. And I've worked in schools for 40 years. I still can't do it. I have a background check because I used to go in and read to a second grade class.
Yeah.
They did a full background check on me.
So there's a whole can of worms this thing
opens.
My word. And we haven't even gotten into the separation of church and state aspect. Absolutely. We could go on and on about this. And I encourage folks who do want to dive deeper into this some more to go back and check out your appearance on the podcast last time where we talked a little bit more about LifeWise. Unfortunately, I have to move on to our next story Absolutely. Here. But so we talked about Todd Rokita a little bit already, but there's another story this week that I did just want to highlight really quick. This is from the Indiana Citizen. So This group called Exodus Refugee Immigration has sued Todd Rokita. They're the first group to have challenged his civil investigative demands that he's been using to access internal documents, communications from all sorts of law enforcement agencies, nonprofits, businesses, schools, whatever. So Exodus is a nonprofit that helps resettle refugees and other displaced immigrants, here in Indiana. They filed a complaint against Rokita just over 10 days after receiving one of these demands from the AG's office. This complaint asserts that the CID violates the First Amendment's protection of expression and association because the investigative demand is directed toward Exodus's advocacy for and association with immigrant and refugee clients. Rokita announced on the 8th this month that his office had served Exodus with this demand. In the press release, Rokita described them as offering services to illegal aliens through its offices in Indianapolis and Bloomington, and said he was seeking information about possible interference with federal immigration enforcement activities in Monroe County, that's here where I'm at, earlier this year. This civil investigative demand ordered Exodus to respond to 39 separate interrogations and 28 separate requests for production of documents, which was required to be turned over by September 29th. That's 3 weeks. So, Leslie, it sounds like basically organized harassment by the Attorney General's office.
It's the politics of misery. It is miserable people who want other people to be miserable. And I'm kind of quoting Dr. Bandy Lee here, but we must reject the politics of misery. That's what it is. It is another power flex. Rokita just wants to seem like a tough guy. And by the way, I heard that he has a child with a disability. So shame on you.
That doesn't work.
For trying to hurt other people. We know people have left. People are refugees. It is a kindness. It is a good thing about our country. We are a country of immigrants. I mean, come on, look at the four of us. My ancestors immigrated here, a couple hundred years ago, but they still immigrated here. We have got to reject this lawfare, which is a weaponization of the law, which causes distress and drains the resources. I'm all for lawyers making money, but it is bullying, and it's wrong. Make Indiana better for Hoosiers. Don't try to make us miserable. I mean, that's it. Reject.
Leslie, I'm going to say one of the things that goes along with that politics of misery here is that because we're a flyover state, as they call us, I really think that some of our elected officials will do just about anything to gain the attention of the president, hoping that they will not just get his attention, but his approval. And so that scares me, because people that are trying to get attention will do just about anything. And when that happens, I think it makes them look foolish. And it hurts us.
Confidence. They don't have confidence. They're sucking up for what? Have confidence in yourself. Make Indiana amazing.
Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, chasing after somebody who's deranged, who has dementia's approval. I don't know. It is not sane. It's not sane.
Yeah, right. I think Rokita is what the kids would call a pick-me girl. He's right? pick me, President Trump. I'm the MAGAist of them all. So I have to move on and keep us going here. And Jennifer, I haven't heard enough from you. So let's talk about regulation, utilities, and power in the state. So Mike Braun has been touting how much he cares about Indiana ratepayers, and right now the state is exploring different ways to potentially save ratepayers money. So members of the General Assembly heard from consultants on Wednesday about the potential benefits of setting utility rates over multiple years rather than approving them annually. They're considering like performance incentives or, you know,
Performance
reliability incentives.
What are the performance incentives for? To charge us more money? How much they can gouge us? Because it's not on saving the consumer money.
This article suggests it's for things like reliability or accomplishing certain goals, like, I don't know, uptime or having outages fixed quickly, whatever. I don't know. Like currently, what we do in Indiana, we have a cost of service regulation model, meaning that utilities file their total services costs annually and then submit that alongside their rate requests. This consulting firm basically recommended potentially a forecasted revenue model under which the utility projects its costs into the future, and then they can maybe set rates for a couple years out ahead at a time, or maybe they've, in addition to performance incentives, maybe there would be performance like penalties if they don't do certain things. Like, for example, one of these consultants shared that utilities could be tasked with reducing their average service interruption times and could be fined if they fall below the benchmark. I don't know. Jennifer, sounds like they're just like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Maybe you move some things here, you move some things here. I mean,
well, nothing
the cost of energy is just going to keep going up, right?
Well, nothing that I hear you say seems like it's going to funnel down to the consumer, except for the costs. So like if they start getting fined for this and that, who's going to pay for those fines? We're going to pay for those fines. They have a way of funneling this down to us. When I was doing research on this, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, but the title of this was The Three Kings. And so I was trying to do some research on that because I didn't mention that I'm actually here for Puerto Rico for a while, and Three Kings is a big thing here. They celebrate Three Kings Day a little bit after Christmas. And so I know that that's not what this was about. So I started to do some research, and really you could only find one name. Well, I only found one name of the Three Kings. It seems like a couple of them weren't quite sure. You guys might have other information, but
I've got them, and actually that's our next story because it sort of ties in with this, yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I just was kind of trying to bring that up, but this was an issue obviously the whole time I was campaigning. Before, somebody who really has a lot of good information on this, has done a lot of work, is like Michelle Higgs with the Rural Summit. We talked a lot about this, and also in Southern Indiana and other places across the country. Oh my gosh, I cannot think. Solar farms, solar farms were a big thing. And I think maybe the one out in Clark County didn't end up passing. I'm not quite sure, but those are things that actually have been tearing communities apart. As well.
Well, I kind of want to just tie that back really quickly to like what Dr. Shaffer was talking about earlier about putting solar panels on schools and stuff. I
was like, that's a great idea.
We should every public government building should have solar panels on it. It should just be like we do it, and we get as self-sufficient as possible and reduce the power, the utility burden on the government, and also, potentially be selling energy back to the grid. That there's so many things we could be doing around power generation, and we're gonna just have to keep more and more right. Because all these damn data centers keep coming in.
That's right.
I did want to point out, we talked about data centers a lot last week in the lead up to a vote by the Indianapolis City County Council there on a proposed Google data center in Franklin Township there in southeastern Marion County. And on Monday, Google pulled that project just before the vote, and it was expected to be voted down. So because Google announced that it was pulling the project, number one, it was met with huge cheers from the massive crowd gathered to protest. But also because the vote was never taken, they could theoretically come back with this again as early as next month. there's a 1 year waiting period if it had been voted down, but now maybe they wait for the uproar to die down and they slide this thing right back on in. But let's see. None of you folks are in the Indianapolis area, but I bet all of you have a data center project in your area somewhere. And just a real quick comment on this, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, I think, we love the fact that we're connected. Everywhere we go, we want to be connected. I remember when it used to be that if you drove, I used to live in Marion, not Marion County, Marion. And if you drove 5 minutes out of the town, you didn't get a cell phone signal. And so you knew that if you were going to get a cell phone signal and you're driving to Indianapolis, you had to go on the interstate, because along the interstate, you could get a cell phone signal. But if you went on 37, you couldn't. Well, we're very proud of the fact that we're accessible everywhere. We can reach, I just got an alert from the New York Times or the Washington Post, one of the two, which I read every day. How cool is that? We want to be connected, but we don't pay the price for it. And the price is somebody has to build those centers. And if we have the spot and if it makes money for the state, which it does, and we need to insist that it makes more money for the state, then it's a good thing. Now, people, I know people don't like it. We're taking up farmland. Well, right now, we're making more money on data center than we would make in products that we can't sell because of tariffs.
Stick a pin in that. That's coming up too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you said, I mean, we all use, look at us here, all of us live streaming in HD. We're using a ton of data. That stuff's stored somewhere. It turns out, the cloud isn't actually in the clouds. It's in giant buildings all over the state. And yeah, we're going to have these things, but the important thing, like you mentioned, Leslie, is going to be not giving away the farm.
What I'm concerned about is water. We cannot live without water, and it uses a ton of water. And I don't know why they can't have more. Well, we do know why they can't have more environmental regulations or work to cool them in a different way. I don't know. But if it sucks up all the fresh water, there's going to be less water in the fields, less water in people's wells. We hear about what's going on near Memphis, where, Elon Musk, there's some giant data center or something down there, and people are having, asthma.
Yeah, they're powering with diesel generators. Yeah, not good. Not good.
I agree that we like our data. We love it, but we think
nothing is free.
Anything. Why can't we do this in a better way that is not going to jeopardize not only us, but the future generations? Are we going to turn Indiana into a dust bowl, into a desert? Because I think at one time Saudi Arabia had water, right? Like something happened there.
Yeah, we absolutely have to make sure we're doing these things the right way. Now, I want to keep moving here in our final full Indiana story, which Jennifer hinted at, and the IEDC, who we keep coming around to again and again on this show because it is just a big sloppy slush fund. So, again, Mike Braun talks a good game about, the regulation and transparency and doing things the right way. And so he began his administration by announcing that they were going to conduct a forensic audit on the IEDC, figure out, where the money's going. And so this is in April. He promised this audit after the Indiana Legislative Insight reported allegations of self-dealing and more among the IEDC and its partners. So in May, the state hires this expensive consulting firm for like $800,000 to conduct this audit. So, changes announced after this release are that all votes must be taken by the IEDC's full board of directors instead of small committees. Okay. The agency's nonprofit arm, the Indiana Economic Development Foundation, will wind down. This shadowy foundation was placed on a spending freeze in April. It was created originally to raise private funds in support of the IEDC mission, but often declined to provide information on its donors and expenses. Finally, the new rule is that all investment activity must stay in Indiana. The IEDC board voted to allow Elevate Ventures, which was this angel venture capitalist investor firm that we talked about a few weeks ago here. The IEDC board allowed them to resume investment operations with the capital already loaned to the funds it manages on the state's behalf. Now, just last month, IEDC deemed Elevate to be in breach of lending languages in all of its loan agreements after defaulting on the angel investment program. And meanwhile, now, Wednesday, they're giving them a new loan for $5 million. So, IEDC, again, Braun with his audit, talking a big game, talks transparency, talks cleaning up government, keeps doing the same shit. Now,
so Scott, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
You know, the state of Indiana last year spent $500 and something million sending that money to private religious schools. And I know I talk a lot about this, but the thing that people don't understand is that money is 100% unregulated. That money goes to the school. You know, when they had the Supreme Court case back in 2013, Meredith versus Pence, they said, well, it's not illegal. It's not, it's not violating separation of church and state because the money goes to the parents. That's the way it worked then. The parents actually received a check. They took it into the school, signed it over to the school. Now they don't do that. That money goes directly to the school. Direct payment from the state to a religious-backed or a religious organization. So let me tell you what's happening with it in Fort Wayne. We did this study where we looked at 10 years before the voucher system started, and then the first 10 years of the voucher system, and we looked at building permits for the churches that own these schools. Now, each of them have separate addresses. You know, there's a church address and a school address. The building permits are on the church addresses. Guess what happened? The 10 years before the voucher system, all you see is a couple $1 million altogether for all the churches that own schools. All right. After the voucher system, 10 years of the voucher system, the first 10, hundreds of millions of dollars spent by the churches, not the schools, the churches. And we all heard the story that happened where a priest stood in front of his congregation and said, there are a lot of you that send your kids to the school here. You need to apply for the vouchers because we need to get the steeple fixed. Okay.
Yeah, that's not
hundreds of millions of dollars pouring into churches all across the state of Indiana, completely unregulated. And what are they doing with it? Well, we assume it's to increase teacher pay and it's to do, make sure kids have a great, safe environment to go to school, that they're providing special education services as needed, and all the other. No, you know what? That's not happening. Somebody's getting rich, and you want to guess who it is?
Yes. You're exactly right. You're describing the same situation. It's a big sloppy slush fund.
It is
for the political allies of the state Republicans, the churches, and these big businesses. And some of these folks, Jennifer had mentioned already, these three kings. So the investigation from the Indianapolis Star came out just earlier this week. And these three kings are some startup founders, or, well, they're former executives with the state, who were involved with the startup side of the IEDC. So these guys are former IEDC executive Dave Roberts, That's probably the one that Jennifer was referring to. But also the Purdue Research Foundation president, Chad Pittman, and a former economic development policy guru for Mitch Daniels by the name of Paul Mitchell, not the hair guy. So these guys were given this nickname, the Three Kings, from startup founders who said they believed the men's influence had the power to make or break some startups' chances to access state economic development contracts. Entities controlled in part by these three guys received more than $180 million over less than 6 years in taxpayer-funded grants and no-bid professional service contracts. Sometimes Roberts himself was involved in the IEDC's decision to dedicate millions of dollars worth of taxpayer dollars to the organizations. An analysis by the Indy Star found that more than $100 million worth of awards were doled out to those organizations, while Roberts played an instrumental role in choosing funding recipients at the IEDC. Here, my favorite one is this. Perhaps the most obvious example of Roberts' overlapping roles was laid out in a 2022 request for more IEDC funding from the Battery Innovation Center, where federal nonprofit filings show Roberts was serving as board chair. The letter from Roberts' organization was addressed to Roberts in his capacity as the IEDC's chief innovation officer. Jennifer, if that isn't conflict of interest, I don't know what is.
I mean, everything is. I don't think that you can find any department anywhere in the state of Indiana that doesn't have some type of conflict of interest. It's just, I feel like conflict of interest is just not a thing anymore. It's just not even a concept in government, it seems, anymore. Even at the local level, I see that in my own community. And right now we're dealing with a lot of Republicans, but unfortunately it can go other ways as well. So
we just have to look at Indianapolis and Marion County to see that it is not an exclusively Republican technique. I mean, Democrats are equally capable of corruption, even though we don't have as much power in Indiana to engage in it.
Well, I do want to give a shout out to those folks in Indy, because they definitely inspired me to look a lot deeper at some things. And sometimes that's what it takes, is a group of people to really stand up and make a lot of noise.
Absolutely. I wish we had so much more time to cover all these Indiana stories, but we're already coming up on an hour here, so I do need to transition to our national headlines. Although this first one, I should note, does have an Indiana angle. So, where are we? This week, excuse me, Scott Bessent, the Trump Treasury Secretary, is pledging to use bottomless U.S. financial resources to prop up one of the world's chronic economic failures, Argentina, which has lurched into its latest debt and currency crisis. So, why bail out Argentina? And here I'm quoting from the American Prospect. Because, they say, the current president, Javier Milei, is a far-right-wing libertarian sycophant of Donald Trump, and the two are twins when it comes to perverse economic policies. Milei, who was elected in October of 2023, has used extreme austerity, ravaging social spending, to balance the budget, restore international confidence in the peso, reduce inflation, and attract foreign capital. However, the strategy backfired in every respect. This year, little foreign investment materialized, inflation crept back up, the peso was strong, so exports were depressed. Argentina has had to dip into their dollar reserves to defend the peso's value, and they are almost out of hard currency. The austerity crushed both consumer demand and Milei's approval ratings. His political credibility at home and globally sank along with the peso. So, on Tuesday, though, Scott Bessent elaborated on his pledge to bail out Milei. He vowed to purchase dollar-denominated Argentine government debt as conditions warrant and offer immediate credit through the Exchange Stabilization Fund, as well as a $20 billion swap line with the Argentine Central Bank. So, I seem to recall every time in our country when one industry or another needed a bailout. Republicans like Trump, like Besant, they, the government never seems to have the money. The market, they say, should work freely as it is intended. And if these things can't compete on the market, they should go under. Well, why don't they apply the same rules here to their buddy Malay, Leslie?
Well, because I think they're afraid that they'll kick Malay out and they'll have a better democracy. They'll get a more democratic leader, and they don't want that, right? They want this axis of autocracies. It is ridiculous, right? They had to kill USAID, which kept many people alive around the globe and helped stabilize and reduce poverty levels. It's something very needed. And yet, they have the money for this, which they definitely should not be doing. But of course, it's just another thing of somebody in charge. When it's something you want, they don't have the money. When it's something they want, oh, oops, we do have the money. And the American people should be outraged. We should be outraged. I mean, they keep telling us, oh, America first, America first. And here we are supporting, Argentina. I'm sure it's a beautiful country. I've never been there, but I studied Spanish in school and I love it. But no, they let them have a democracy. Get this guy out. He's ruining the country. And what are they're just going to be pouring money into a sinking ship? No.
I'm glad you brought up USAID because that sort of helps me tie into the Indiana angle here. In addition to like saving lives all around the world for a relatively low investment and burnishing our, sometimes not so great image with the international community, USAID was also a boon for farmers. Like we bought food in bulk to feed the world from American farmers. Well,
right.
So this Argentina bailout is actually going to potentially hurt Indiana farmers because to support, to shore up its own economy, Argentina suspended its 26% export on soybeans, which immediately lured China, the top importer of U.S. soybeans typically, as a buyer. So this undercuts U.S. farmers whose products remain weighed down by a 20% tariff on China as imposed by Washington, right? So China, according to an economist at the American Soybean Association, China probably booked the rest of their November supplies last night, as soon as this went through. Indiana's economy faces broad implications because corn, soybeans, and pork account for more than $6.4 billion in agricultural exports, and an estimated 1/3 of the state's farm income is exported. But we've essentially been locked out of China, one of our largest markets, this year, right? So Indiana, our soybeans are piling up in the silos. We're bailing out Argentina to help them sell soybeans to China. I mean, what are we doing here?
Makes the world go
Jennifer,
round.
Why?
This is the
Why
one
do
where
our
I said I
farmers
just.
like Trump? He
Huh?
continually screws them.
What'd you say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Why do our farmers like Trump? He consistently screws them.
I don't know. Why do a lot of people like Trump? I mean, obviously there's something that appeals to them about him. I don't know. I mean,
I think I can contribute to that thought because what I see happening, and I see this in all the groups that are buying into the aura of Trump. They're doing this because they hope it's going to bring money back their way. And the record has shown that if you get into the right pocket, you're going to get some money. So that's the whole reason why we see some of these groups doing this. What looks stupid to us. Why would you do this? But because if I know the person, they're not wicked. But if I don't know them, I can talk about them all day long and say, they're horrible people. But if they happen to be my brother-in-law, then I'm going to say, oh no, he's a good guy. He's doing things that benefit the state. All right. Really? Well, let's talk about if it were not your relation or your friend or whatever. So, this happens on such a big scale. It's hard to even understand.
It's getting conned. It's a con game.
It
It's
is
a
a con.
three-shell Monty. And, I was thinking, I think I talked to you, Scott, about one of my favorite books is Old Black Witch that I read as a child. And, in this
Yes.
book, there are these little, depictions of these two robbers, and they've got masks on and they're little skinny guys and they got like a sack over their back. And that's what we were raised to think like the bad guys look like. But the bad guys don't necessarily look like that, they look like these guys. And
the bad guys
they're not wearing masks and French coats. They're wearing
suits and red
business
ties.
attire usually. So Leslie, I'm glad you mentioned like this sort of axis of autocracy that Millet is part of, and comparing him to one of his democratic South American counterparts, who opened up the UN General Assembly this week, as is custom, I understand. Brazil opened up the first day of speeches, and it was their president, Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, who reflected that many of the world's other leaders, Lula's position reflects that many of the world's other leaders. He drew a link between the crisis facing multilateralism, that is, the inability of governments to productively work together at places like the United Nations, with the erosion of democracy in various societies, like his neighbor Argentina. So, in the face of great power competition and bullying, most countries in the world, especially in the so-called global South, want the United Nations to work as it's intended. So in addition to Lula's speech, we got a speech at the General Assembly this week from Ahmed al-Shara, the first Syrian president in almost 60 years to deliver a speech at the UN. It's been since 1967. Now, al-Shara was formerly a Al-Qaeda militant in Iraq, known by the nom de guerre Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, and he spent several years held captive by the U.S. military in Iraq. Now, apparently, he has since renounced Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, and he led the military campaign that finally overthrew longtime Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. So, interesting to see Syria retake a place on the global stage, even though we are potentially wary of their new guy. But one person who we're definitely wary of is the speaker who followed Lula at the UN, and that was our guy, President Trump. So, in an unhinged, absolutely unhinged address, he went on for like an hour. He was allotted 15 minutes, and in his rambling speech, he let's see. He had no shortage of false claims. He touted peace while telling drug cartels he would blow them out of existence. He questioned the purpose of the UN's existence, but later told the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that the U.S. is behind the United Nations 100%. Trump claimed he ended 7 wars. He said upswell of support for Palestine would encourage continued conflict and be a reward for Hamas, as Britain, Canada, Australia, Portugal, and France all formally recognized a Palestinian state. He said if Russia does not end its invasion of Ukraine, he's prepared to impose a strong round of powerful tariffs, even though we don't really trade with Russia. He scolded representatives of their countries for immigration policies, telling their countries that they're going to hell. And he described climate change as the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah, thank you.
I
don't
like
know
that.
if you guys caught any of Trump's speech, and
Well,
if you had any thoughts.
Scott, let me ask you this. So, if you follow international politics at all, and it funnels through the United Nations, people tend to put their best foot forward when let's talk about, Nikita Khrushchev, who, took his shoe off and slammed on the desk and we will destroy you, that kind of thing. All right. But,
there was that time Yasser Arafat pulled out his gun, and there was that time Gaddafi went on a rant for like an hour. Yeah.
So what bothers me is what it makes us look like as a country. When you get past the BS, this is a good place to live. Except for kids riding on little scooters and that kind of thing, making racket and yelling at each other. I don't hear gunshots except during hunting season. It's a good place to live. So why in the world do we have to go in front of the United Nations and tell them that they're all going to hell? Really? That's ridiculous. I don't know if that was his ploy to support Christian nationalism, kind of like his thing back after Charlottesville when he said to the Proud Boys, stand by, and, all that. When he goes off script, which he did in this case, went off script, and you can always tell when he does, because he absolutely doesn't make any sense, and he makes these absurd claims. He stopped 7 wars. Well, he was also going to stop Ukraine and Russia on day one. He was going to get inflation down on day one. Grocery prices were going to be down on day one. And I'm thinking, is day one still going on? Because I haven't seen those things happen yet.
Yeah, right. Just an embarrassment all around.
It is.
And additionally, I'll get you in a second there, Leslie. He besides the speech, he also embarrassed himself by there was the elevator stopped while he was about to get on it, and he's claiming sabotage. Meanwhile, it was one of his staffers. He complained about the teleprompter not working. Well, his people were operating it. He said the sound system was not working, and that was sabotage. Well,
which all comes down to he wanted to remodel.
So people can hear it as a translation.
Yeah.
Leslie,
well, first of all, I just think that the United Nations should have enforced their 15-minute rule, and they should have told him, you're up, and cut the mic, because
they're in New York. They could have borrowed the hook from the Apollo Theater.
I think people need to follow the rules. He is a person who will just overrun any rule if he's given the opportunity. And also, he's a 79-year-old man in cognitive decline. It is obvious. We've all known people who have dementia. Both my parents have passed, and they ended up with dementia. And so it is, he's being propped up. He really can't execute the duties as president. I don't believe that he does most of his own tweeting, and he signs these executive orders that people just put in front of him, and they tell him what to say. But it's just an embarrassment. I think a lot of people listening were in shock because they could not believe that, the United States that they knew of a few years ago, that this is the leader that we have right now. And it is, but I think that, the American people are waking up. A lot of them had already didn't vote for him and didn't support him, but more and more people are seeing this. This is not who we are as a nation. This is not a functioning leader. This is not a democratic leader. This is not the way to the future. I don't know. He's stuck in his own mind, his life of grievances that he just can't get out of. He's stuck there.
Executing duties is probably all he's about good for anymore at this point. That's a poop joke. All right, I do have to move on. Jennifer, let's talk about Russia. So, looking like World War III again this week. Russia's been for weeks making incursions into NATO airspace. So now Trump long reluctant to confront Moscow, has this week stunned allies by saying he supports shooting down Russian aircraft if the incursion continues. And the Kremlin's response was blunt: shoot down a Russian jet and war will follow. So that's nice. NATO officials believe Russia is deliberately testing the alliance's defenses and its political will with a wave of escalating provocation. So a couple weeks ago, September 9th and 10th, nearly 24 Russian drones entered Polish airspace, forcing NATO to scramble fighter jets. Later that week, a Russian drone lingered for nearly an hour in Romanian territory. A week after that, 3 Russian fighter jets flew 12 minutes into Estonian airspace with their transponders off. Then this Thursday, U.S. fighter jets intercepted Russian warplanes near Alaska's airspace. For the 9th time this year, Norway reported 3 separate Russian airspace violations, and swarms of drones forced multiple airports in Denmark to shut down this week. Now, while the culprit in that incident has not yet been named, Denmark's prime minister declared that a hybrid war was underway on European soil. He's not the only one, because NATO allies are already preparing. Estonia is building miles of anti-tank trenches along their border with Russia, while France and Germany have ordered contingency plans to treat thousands of wounded soldiers per day in their hospitals. Both parties have an interest in averting the cataclysmic conflict, but as tensions soared this week, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared at the UN that NATO and Moscow are already at war. Jennifer, how does that make you feel?
How does it make me feel? It makes me feel like I don't know why we're still in this spot, because I mean, Russia has just given us everything that we need. They just continue to keep doing things. So in terms of behavioral, the likelihood it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. We've got to stop thinking, oh, this is going to change. He is very much, he's not toying with us. He's telling us what he's doing and what he's going to continue to ramp up. So, Trump, I don't know if he's seen the light now or he just realizes he doesn't have anything left, in there with Russia, but we definitely need to be more prepared in taking this seriously, because we're already in it. We've been in the thick of this for years.
Yeah, I certainly do not have any faith in Donald J. Trump as a wartime president, so help us God.
Except for creating it.
Well, yeah, there's certainly that. So
all over the place.
I do need to zoom things back in here. Let's bring things from the international realm back home, where Jimmy Kimmel made a triumphant return back this week after his suspension by ABC in the aftermath of his very, very tepid remarks after Charlie Kirk's assassination. So Kimmel came back on Tuesday with a 6.3 million viewers during his return show, which is
that more?
Massive ratings for a late night show, and even bigger considering that 23% of U.S. households the show was not available due to boycotts by Nexstar and Sinclair, big owners of ABC affiliates in local markets around the country, who are, far right, conservative owned, and definitely inject their politics into their local stations. But even they caved by Friday, bringing back Kimmel to their airwaves. The company's moves mean that Kimmel will return to local TV on Nexstar's 28 ABC affiliates, along with Sinclair's 38 local markets. Kimmel's suspension lasted less than a week, while the affiliate blackout stood for just over a week. Now, again, I'm not like the biggest Jimmy Kimmel fan in the world. I can't tell you the last time I watched a late night talk show, but this is a win for free speech. Yes, yeah. Dr. Shaffer?
Yeah, absolutely. Because here's the thing. We have to remember that he's a comedian. Now, one of the best news commentators that I listen to all the time is a comedian, Jon Stewart, and I love it. He was very supportive of Jimmy Kimmel too. But the thing is, we have to understand how to laugh at ourselves, and we have forgotten that. We don't know if we think we're that good that we can't be laughed at or made fun of, then there's something wrong. That's an insecurity that somebody needs to work on. That maybe they need to see a therapist. I don't know, but if I'm confident in myself and somebody makes a joke about me, I'm going to be the one laughing the loudest because I love humor, and I think we have to respect it. I'm a huge David Letterman fan. I love his stuff that he does. My next guest needs no introduction, and he's done some terrific things like that. Jon Stewart did a lot of cool stuff about working with our veterans who were suffering the respiratory problems because of the burn pits in Iraq. All right, who would think that we would need to have a comedian take the lead because our government wasn't doing anything? And I think, like you, I'm not a big Kimmel fan. I had never watched any of his monologues, but I taped the one from the other night. Thought I wouldn't miss it,
As did a lot of people. Yeah, it's super important. And look, man, there's nothing more American than like late night comedians criticizing the president. It's just like, it's the most American thing you can do.
We should be proud if we get mentioned on that,
Yeah. Now let's see. Oops, I skipped a guy. There we are. So let's talk about this one this week. Slow news week in the Epstein front, but there's still stuff going on, and I want to talk about this. So the other day we did get a partial records release from House Democrats. They released documents. This is from the House Oversight Committee. They published Friday some select names from the Epstein list, including Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, Peter Thiel. Bill Gates was in there. We already knew about Gates' relationship with Epstein. And so, yes, these new files are notable in that they suggest all three of these powerful figures, Bannon, Musk, and Thiel, had relationships with Epstein after his controversial plea deal that forced him to register as a sex offender. So these guys still hanging out with Epstein long after we knew who he was, including Bannon met this guy like in February of 2019, just months before he was charged with sex trafficking of minors. And apparently, not mentioned in this these documents or this article, but Bannon has hours and hours of Epstein interviews in his possession that we do not have access to. So that's interesting to say the least. Leslie, any surprises?
Yeah, one big one. How about Peter Thiel, who is the person that got J.D. Vance into government?
Well, I will tell you this:
Vance a millionaire.
We know Thiel wasn't partaking in the underage ladies because he is gay. So let's not associate Thiel with that sort of stuff at Epstein's island. But again, you still shouldn't be hanging out with the guy because he's a registered sex offender, man.
Well, they've been circling the wagons is really what it is, right? They're pulling themselves in tighter and tighter. And I do think this is very important information. I read a Substack post of a woman said that one of her favorite movies is Eyes Wide Shut, and she looks at it with a different lens. But, I don't think I've told this story in your podcast, but when I lived in New York, I don't know exactly the year. It was sometime maybe between 1996 and 1999, but I was at a bar with some friends, and a woman, you know how sometimes you have like a circle and then like another circle will join your circle because somebody knows each other. This woman started talking to me about this sex ring involving elites. And who was I? I mean, I wasn't even really that political at the time. And I just was like, what? It was so disgusting to me. She said, oh yeah, all these people are having sex with these young girls. I remember she said 13, right? So 13 and up, right? I guess. And I just didn't know
Wow.
what to do with this information. I wish I'd asked her more questions. It wasn't on the radar, but this has been going on for a long time, and it is not good. And all these elite banks are guilty of doing allowing all these cash transactions, and they all made money. And it's bad, and it's bad for the fabric of our society. It's bad for the women. It's bad for the survivors, the families. It's bad just knowing that these things go on. Yeah, and the grooming. Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Yeah, I see.
Well, and here's the I think the whole Epstein issue is the central core of the corruption that we have. But I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Wag the Dog. Oh my word. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it, because it is exactly what happens. Every time we have a dump of information, or the president goes on this, his rants in the United Nations, or he changes his tune on Ukraine and Russia and all the things in it, you know what it is? Wanting to us keep our attention on all those things and ignore the main thing. And the concept of Wag the Dog is that politicians wanted to hide something, so they created a fake war.
Yeah.
And so everybody concentrated on this fake war.
Mhm.
All right, that's what we do every day. There are such huge data dumps. I just got a New York Times thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene has decided she doesn't want to support Trump anymore. Okay. Woohoo!
Great.
Okay.
Broken clock right twice a day.
Yes, but let me just say, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to try to take all the MAGA for herself, because I watched that Epstein survivors, when they did their telecast, and then she spoke at it, and she was like spellbinding. She was trying to say, yes, we want to listen to the women because of all the MAGA people who want these files released too.
Yeah.
So yeah, she
right.
they know Trump's not going to be here forever, and they're seeing who will take MAGA is what it is. Who wants
you're
MAGA?
right.
I can't decide whether like the Epstein stuff is a like all the war and everything else is a distraction from the Epstein stuff, or if the Epstein stuff is a distraction from the fascism.
Yeah.
Because let's look at what's going on this week in American streets, right? Okay, so for all the talk of political violence being coming from the radical left, right? We have the Daily Caller this week. The editor at large, okay, not just some schmuck columnist, Jeffrey Ingersoll, writes a column titled "Enough is Enough, I Choose Violence," writing that there should be a cost, a violent one, for the lies, for the taking the American people for granted, for selling them out at every end, for bullying them nonstop. He said, let's reinstitute the cost. Moving past the legal violence, let's get to the actual violence, shall we? That's pretty explicit. But let's take a look at the legal violence briefly, shall we? So this week, the FBI fired at least 15 agents Friday in connection with their actions during the George Floyd protests. What did they do wrong? How did these FBI agents violate policy during those George Floyd protests? Did they smash some heads in? Did they go above and beyond their duties to incite violence? No. They took a knee. They tried to diffuse the situation. So there's some legal violence, some more legal violence we saw this week when the Department of Justice indicted former FBI Director James Comey. Very weak indictment, if you ask all the legal experts. It's only about 2 pages long, and it alleges that he falsely testified to Congress in 2020 about authorizing someone to be an anonymous source in news stories. The indictment alleges that Comey made a false statement in testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, apparently in an interaction with Senator Ted Cruz. So now Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't James Comey kind of help Trump get elected by announcing that Hillary Clinton was under investigation
gosh, I
week before
remember
the
that.
election in 2016?
I remember that. That does not matter. I don't think Trump feels like he owes people favors at all. And he's got a list of people. But you are correct. I very much remember that happening. I could see it.
See,
Yeah.
and Scott, you haven't gone down this angle, but this is one that people should be aware of, and we need, in all of the stuff, there are certain things we need to watch. And one of them is to talk about, we're going to send the National Guard to Memphis. We're going to send the National Guard to Portland. We're going to send the National Guard to pick a place. I live in Fort Wayne, which is considered a refuge city. I'm expecting at some point in time that they're going to say it's time to send in the National Guard because the crime is out of control. I can walk the street in Fort Wayne at any time I want to without any fear. There is no crime wave. There is no issue, except that we accept immigrants. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because just Friday, President Trump has ordered the deployment of troops to Portland, Oregon, authorizing full force if needed to suppress protests targeting ICE detention centers. Now, listen, I have family out there on the West Coast. I was in Portland this summer. Turns out, not a war zone. Very lovely place.
So what's the point then, Scott?
American city. They have some homeless problems.
Ratings. Just wants attention. Get on the news. I mean, honestly, I keep saying these are like the worst. It's the worst rock band in all of history. As a singer-songwriter, they just want attention. But their songs stink. They didn't take the time to learn how to play an instrument or, develop a real true talent. They just want attention. And it's time for them to just get off the stage. They are, it's not good entertainment. It's just entertainment.
And Leslie, this is probably the only time I'm going to disagree with you, because I think there's another thing at play, and that is getting people accustomed to the idea of having the military everywhere you go.
Absolutely.
Because it's one little step from that into what? Martial law.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have martial law, there won't be elections.
You're absolutely right about that. I'm just saying, like, I was watching.
I know. Well, I'm with you.
Posting of Portland saying, hey, look at this. We're out here having a picnic. It's like, here's the reality. You're trying to create this smoke-filled, gun blasting, crime reality. That's not reality. It's like their reality. But you're right. They want to create
and unfortunately, we have a generation of people who have forgotten Kent State. I served proudly in the Army National Guard, but I was never trained for civilian peacekeeping. That was never the mission. It's still not the mission of the Army National Guard to go in and keep the peace. Let's support the police officers who are on the ground, the sheriff's departments, and all of these people who are dealing with crime when it happens. Let's not send in people. Let's not send the Marines, for God's sake, to Los Angeles. 700 Marines. Why? The Marines go in when governments need to be changed. They're the first in and last out. They do the dirty work. Really?
Yeah,
you can see Los Angeles. No.
Yeah, you can see the administration just trying to provoke a response. They did it in Chicago over this past weekend. I've got notes in here about that. There's the Broadview neighborhood in Chicago. There's this massive ICE facility there. People have been protesting it all week. The village of Broadview was told by ICE that there will be a shit show, end quote, in Broadway today. ICE is in Chicago trying to provoke a response. This follows the incident on a Wednesday in Dallas where someone shot at an ICE facility. Now, they say that the intended targets were ICE, but detainees were the people who were hit. One man was killed, 2 others were injured. And Kash Patel, the FBI director, like is posting within hours bullet casings on social media that say anti-ICE written on them. I don't know if I trust anything coming out of this government anymore. That's going to tie in with our one big thing. But with all this fascism going on, I do have to kind of move on to get to our final segment here. But I want to say, there's a government shutdown looming. And if our government is going to be doing this, should Democrats force a shutdown? And I'm just a quick yes or no from each of you. Jennifer, shutdown? Yeah?
I'm not going to give you a straight answer. I don't have all the information in my head yet, so we'll wait and see.
I'm going to say yes, because it would show that they're doing something. It's about time for somebody to say enough is enough.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we've forgotten that we have 3 branches of government, co-equal branches of government. So why is the Supreme Court, as it did again this week, supporting everything that comes to them from President Trump? That's not their job. Why is the legislature, the Senate and the House of Representatives, why are they not taking action? Why are they not doing something? This is not an all-powerful person, he whose name we do not mention, or, okay, let's be real. We have constitutionally 3 branches of government who are supposed to check on each other. 2 of them are sitting back and doing nothing. Why?
And if he wasn't worried about what would happen during a government shutdown, he wouldn't be trying to already blame the Democrats. But the Democrats have this ability, and they, we should not be funding these ridiculous things and get back to some real governing and not performative insanity.
Let me ask really quick, Leslie. It's apparently the Democrats' demand is that we need to restore the subsidies for the ACA marketplace. Should they be demanding more concessions to go along with things?
Absolutely. They should be demanding everything because that's how negotiation works. You start at the top and then you negotiate down, right? If that's your only thing, you don't have a lot of leverage. Demand everything. USAID restored, all the grants, Doge kicked out. Demand it all. And, because they are bullies. They are bullies.
And because we have the right to demand it.
That's right.
Yes.
We the people.
All right. So let's move on. Let's talk about our one big thing today. And I told you what we were going to talk about here at the beginning of this Monday. The Trump administration with Health and Human Service Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. alongside him said, hey, maybe Tylenol is the cause for autism. Now, I don't think any of us believe them, so let us bring in an actual medical doctor here. Dr. Tim Peck is theoretically with us.
He's trying to be with
us. So we're going to try and bring him back here in a second. But anyway, so let's talk about this. So, there he is. There's Dr. Tim. Welcome.
How are you?
Welcome. Thanks for being here. Glad to have another voice in this conversation that knows a hell of a lot more about this than I do, and seemingly a hell of a lot more about this than the president or his HHS secretary do. So let's start. And Jennifer, I want to ask you to start because I think you're kind of our resident expert on this. What exactly is autism?
Autism, I think, I can't exactly answer that whole question, but if you're getting to the whole Tylenol part or where it comes from my experience, I will tell you it is hereditary, it is in your DNA, and it has gone back, I don't know, through time. Autism for me very much is just how I relate to the world. and how the environment really affects me, and trying to fit into that world can be very challenging because people on the spectrum very much see things differently. We process things differently. I have just learned, I mean, I have only known for a year, I've only suspected for 13 months that I'm autistic, and I got the diagnosis in November last year. And just so many things clicked for me. And I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and things just kind of clicked even more, so much more understanding of that. But I can trace it in my own family line. I can see it for many people. Once they are diagnosed, it's like a domino effect. Like I can see it in my family, an extended family, people that have married into my family for generations and generations. And that is not something that you can tie to any immunization, any type of thing that we might be putting in our body.
Yeah, I'm going to just, for getting it on the record here, I want to give this definition. This is from the Cleveland Clinic. So autistic people are neurodivergent, and that means, that word describes people whose brains are different from what's expected. So if your child is neurodivergent, they may excel more in certain areas and need more support in others compared to their neurotypical peers. Autism is a spectrum. Autistic kids and adults have a wide range of personality traits, strengths, and challenges. This means there's no one-size-fits-all approach to support. Providers tailor support to your child's unique needs and preferences. Finally, it says autism is often misunderstood. Myths about it go back decades, and these have harmed autistic people. We can't erase this history, the clinic says, but we've learned from it. Today's therapies help autistic kids gain skills without forcing them to fit into a certain mold. I think we talked about this a little bit before we went live. With Kennedy, when he talks about, I'm going to pull up a quote from him from much earlier this year. He said, "Autism destroys families and is an individual tragedy as well." He said, "Many autistic children were fully functional and regressed into autism when they were 2 years old. And these kids," he said, this is the quote, says, "never pay taxes. They will never hold a job, never play baseball. They'll never write a poem, never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted." He thinks all autism is severe autism, which is like 10% of the cases. Right, Dr. Mike, I saw your hand.
Yeah, and this is very personal for me because my stepson, who is 29 years old, is autistic, and he is incredible. If you want to know anything about The Wizard of Oz, the movie, he knows everything. Everything. He can tell you everything.
The original.
Yes, the original. Everything about that, everything about every Batman movie. He knows the whole spectrum of the Jaws movies, who produced them, everything. And he's 29 years old. He graduated from Purdue University without any assistance with a 3.0 in theater. He's been working full-time ever since then. So this hold a job business, come on. He just bought his own home. Let's talk autism. Let's talk about
the job.
That these
Paying
are not
taxes.
Weird people. They are normal, great people. And I know as a principal, I had a tremendous staff, wonderful staff in elementary school. And we started getting more and more autistic children. I asked one of the directors at this district level, and they said, well, people are moving into your district because of how you work with autistic kids. And I said, I have teachers that love kids. And it doesn't matter who they are or what they've diagnosed or what they have, they love kids. And it worked. It really did work.
I want to jump in here before you probably end up throwing on Dr. Tim Peck. But just having worked with people with autism from all walks of life, all different abilities, it is important that we definitely recognize that there is such a spectrum and that there are many other cognitive issues, medical issues that affect people with autism. I mean, I have a string of health issues, but I'm able to somewhat manage them now. I know that's going to get worse as I get older, but, I have worked with kids that, we often do forget that even though you say it's a small percentage of people with severe autism, they are very much a group of people that needs a lot of support and a lot of understanding. And it is unfortunate that even within the disability community, we very much discriminate against each other. And all of this still is just another way to divide, a population of people that is already very much marginalized. Okay, that's my
Leslie, you have a child with autism, yeah?
Yes, my son has Down syndrome. He had a stroke at birth, and he has autism. And what I would like to say is, so he is maybe more on the lower functioning spectrum, but the thing that upsets me the most about this is it's quacks, people who've never taken a science class in their life, right? Trying to get between, break the trust between people and their doctors, right? The demise of expertise. How also, though, as a, going through a pregnancy is not easy. I've gone through two, I've, had one miscarriage. It's not easy. And, we do not need to stress pregnant mothers out at all. It's not good for the mother, for the developing fetus. It's not good for society. And it is ridiculous to have these people try to guilt people. After my son was born, I sat there for a long time and thought, what did I do? Did I somehow cause his Down syndrome by not having enough vitamin D, or by doing this or by doing that? It's not productive. It doesn't help. It just makes you feel terrible. And what you need to do is work on accepting your child as they are, and work to make the world a better place, to get more services, which I ended up doing. I worked, as an activist and make, groups for children. And I'm still doing that as I work with children with severe disabilities in the school self in Valparaiso. And so I do see children with autism that are on the severe end of the spectrum, but we need acceptance. We need love. We don't need quackery, and also having a fever when you're pregnant can be very detrimental to a fetus and can cause all kinds of issues. And if Tylenol helps bring down a dangerous fetus, and I'm looking forward to hearing Dr. Tim Peck speak about this, that is what we need. We need experts calming women and helping bring about a healthy society, healthy babies, a healthy environment, not fear mongering, just to try to, because we know RFK Jr. has made money from suing vaccine makers, and it's a grift. It is not science. It is not true. It's not life. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
Yeah. Thanks, Leslie. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because you mentioned like feeling guilt potentially, like, did I do this? And that's what they used to blame autism on, right?
Yeah.
I've pulled an article here about, like what families are saying in
cold mothering
response to this annoyance.
Refrigerator mom.
Yeah, yes, that is exactly what I got pulled up. Refrigerator mothers, because they were cold and they didn't love their children enough, and apparently that was the cause of autism. Dr. Tim, from a medical standpoint, what do we actually know about autism? Like, what is the cause of it, if there is one?
Yeah, so the conversation today is about autism. It's also about Tylenol, which is much broader than autism, right? Autism affects a certain amount of population. Tylenol is used by hundreds of millions of people a year. And so there's two different kind of medical sides to talk about here, because when the president spoke about this issue of Tylenol, there were some 20, I think there was 17 clips of him saying, don't take Tylenol. And most people are consuming that as, don't take Tylenol, over. That's what they see. Not, don't take Tylenol if you're pregnant, don't take Tylenol for, related to vaccines, don't take Tylenol for this or that. And so this issue is very broad. As we talk about autism, this is both a deep and a broad issue unto itself. In terms of causes, it's multi-genetic. It's a spectrum disease, as Jennifer called it. Important from the medical side and the spectrum and what a spectrum disease is. We hear the word spectrum disorder used for autism often to talk about people who are right on the spectrum in terms of their, usually where that comes from is around their communication skills, where on the communication spectrum they are. Spectrum diseases exist all throughout medicine. We have them everywhere. We have them through autoimmune diseases like lupus. These are spectrum diseases where we don't even quite have the right way of diagnosing it. So we say if they have 6 of these 12 different things, then we're going to call it lupus, right? And we're going to treat it in such a way, because it's not. Cancer is a spectrum disease. We can't just say lung cancer. There are 50 different lung cancers, and within each lung cancer, there are multiple different genetic abnormalities that cause that cancer. It is a spectrum disease. So when we talk about autism, the spectrum means that there are multiple different ways of landing on having this disease, most of which are going to be genetic. But just like anything, there are also going to be environmental factors that will lead to the triggering of this disease or not. And we don't have the answers of what that is or isn't. And I wish we did. And we need to have intelligent, non-political research to be able to figure out what the causes are so that we could go ahead and help families.
Let me ask you about a couple things. So one of the big claims or contentions from Kennedy is that autism rates have like skyrocketed over the last several decades. Now, I'm gonna quote Trump, and he's wrong here. He says, since 2000, autism rates have surged by much more than 400%. He said the rate used to be 1 in 20,000, then 1 in 10,000, and now it's 1 in 31. The facts on that, and this is from the Associated Press, is that autism rates have ballooned, but his numbers are off. So, it was 1 in 10,000 back in the 90s. In 2000, the CDC says it was more like 1 in 150. Then 2018, it's 1 in 44. And then apparently by 2022, it's 1 in 31. Now, what explains the increased diagnosis of autism?
We have one thing that we know explains most of it, but then there's the other piece of that might explain a little bit more of it, which we should talk about, which is really where the misinformation comes. The thing that we know explains most of it is that the characterization of the disease has allowed us to have more experts, more people become experts that aren't only just autism experts, including in the education world, to be able to see people who need help because of their where they are on the autism spectrum and get them to the place where they need help and therefore get a diagnosis. So this is a case of the same incidence of the disease in society, but now just being recognized and diagnosed. And we see this in a lot of diseases that happen as we find out more about it, as we have resources that actually can help it, and as we have a society that can actually accept, help, use the word neurodivergent. That wasn't a word that we used, right, 20 years ago. You have these words to say, okay, we accept you within our society. We start to diagnose things more. And so it's more around having people be recognized for their disease rather than actually having more people have the disease. Now, before I continue, let me just say is this other small part. It can't be measured that well, right? That's a really great way to say, how do I know exactly how many people in 1960 had this disease or not, or 1980 disease or had or not, right? So that absolutely, what I just talked about, accounts for a huge increase. Is it the whole increase? I can't tell you that or not. And I'm a doctor, a scientist, someone who says I can't tell you that specifically or not, right? Because we don't have the full research to tell you.
So like, as I understand it, is like maybe these other numbers, this 1 in 20,000, this 1 in 10,000, they were categorizing this, what we say is severe autism now. That's autism. And then, the other people, they didn't realize, oh, this is a kind of autism too. Like there were always people who were neurodivergent and now we understand it better. Like Jennifer, for example, you're a grown ass woman. You just found out you're autistic last year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I seriously had no idea at all. And I have worked my entire career with people with disabilities, and I have family with disabilities. Yeah, but I will tell you that I also, we haven't really talked a lot about some of those populations, but I come from Mormon ancestry, and they are one of those populations that did have a lot of inbreeding. And there's other populations like that that have that they actually study. Utah has a huge study about people with autism, a whole database of people, and they're very much interconnected. And I very much believe that that is where mine came from.
What are you saying? It's like autism is potentially caused by inbreeding, or like, hey, if there's some
I mean,
autism in the community, then it's just going to get multiplied via
in the gene pool, and then people on the spectrum are neurodivergent people are very much attracted to other people that are neurodivergent, often because we get along better. It doesn't necessarily mean that the communication is always better, because it is still very much a struggle, but just, keeping it in that gene pool.
And I just want to say, it looks like, Leslie, you want to say something. I just want to correct something that you said,
yes.
Aaron, before you do, and then I'll kick it over to you, Leslie.
Yeah, I don't have a medical degree. These are just my
No. So with Scott, what we were saying is, yes, we identified more people like Jennifer, and children, especially now, who need help, and we have this way of helping in school for children. But there's also, Leslie's son, as you described him, probably wouldn't have been diagnosed with autism either.
Right.
20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the very severe cases that have to do with severity because there are other issues going on, in this case, what sounds like a stroke early in life, or intrautero, and so, or in utero, or someone who has Downs, or etc. You're not going to diagnose that as autism before. You're going to focus on the thing that you can see.
Right. And what I wanted to say was, years ago, they used to say people died of consumption, and now it's called tuberculosis. Mm-hmm. So, right. So years ago, they didn't have the term autism, so they didn't diagnose people with autism. And also, hundreds of years ago, 1 out of 10 children died before the age of 10. So there may have been a lot of children who had, additional medical diagnosis who didn't make it to adulthood. So there weren't enough people to study, because, for instance, Down syndrome didn't even get the term until I think the late 1800s. In England, there was a Dr. Downs, who was at an institution, because that's where they used to put people like, my son. And he noticed there were 3 people and they all were sort of the same. And he said, hey, these people have something in common. And so it's as there's more medical knowledge and there's more people to study and more people survive in adulthood and all these things, then we have these new terms. So
was he on the spectrum?
Pardon?
Do you know if that doctor was on the spectrum?
I don't know.
I'm just curious with the 3 and the pattern recognition. Pattern.
Well, they had Down syndrome, so he.
No, I know, but recognizing those patterns in people and those differences,
Well, a lot of them have the same facial structure. They have the similar eyes, and there's like 50 markers, physical markers for Down syndrome. But if most people with Down syndrome didn't survive to adulthood, and it maybe like my son, he could have died as an infant like 100 years ago, because he wasn't feeding, and it's just like a complicated thing. He would throw up when he ate and all these things. So if you had a baby that died within, say, 10 days, you might not even think that there was anything different about them. You just said failure to thrive, or they would have just said failure to thrive. So I think that some people, these are more complicated, nuanced conversations, and people just want something black and white. Oh, there's more autism now. Why? What's the reason? Maybe there always was this amount of autism. We just didn't know.
And then,
go ahead.
Well, no, I wanted to bring in something Jennifer said there, because you talked about the pattern recognition, and one of the things I've seen in response to this is evidence that autistic people, neurodivergent people, have always been around, as they point to people who were like scientists or mathematicians and and hundreds of years ago who were like really hyper focused on like one thing, and now might be like, oh yeah, this person's a little bit autistic, but back then it's like you're a savant,
There is a lot to that pattern recognition, and it can also, I have to be very careful about that though, but there are a lot of people, and I will sometimes hear just certain words or phrases people say, and then I start kind of wondering about that. But I do want to throw something in here that we haven't talked about, and that is the social part of this. And that is also why we're seeing a lot more people, and we haven't seen a lot of people before, or maybe before, because one, a lot of things are just done on men, and males have been the poster child for autism. We look at that through a male lens, but also just the role of women in society and how we just play so many different roles. We learn from a very, very early age, probably in elementary school, to mask. Women, we can be very independent, but that's not typically how you look at things. So men can kind of get by with being rough and just kind of doing weird things. But women are very much ostracized, and we very much have to learn early on that we, in order for survival, especially, when you're younger, that you have to mask. And it's very much an unconscious thing. Like I said, I had no idea. And as I've gone through the last year, I'm able to pull back a lot of layers and see a lot of reasons. But even men in my life, and men that I know that are on the spectrum, it has been a lot harder even for diagnosing them in some ways too, because of some of the masking. It just looks more like how men might present. So, but that is a huge issue with women, and then medical issues on top of that. There are so many medical issues related to being on the spectrum.
Can I pry at that a little bit more? Because does it manifest itself differently in women and men, or is that part of the way we're raised socially, the way men maybe aren't taught to name their emotions or explore those? Is that part of this?
I think that women are often taught to display their emotions and show them, and we mask way, I think, harder than men. So everything in life can be a combination of genetics and your environment and this.
Like you actually know your emotions and know you need to mask them, because men
don't. But that is one of the things. That is one of the things, though, that is challenging, and maybe Tim might be able to talk about this a lot more because I'm not as into it. But there is something called alexithymia, and that is really not being able, like, understanding your emotions, being able to process them in the moment. I definitely have that. I have definitely been in some really bad situations, especially recently, where I don't think a lot of people could stood there, but it's almost kind of like having this like shield on around you, and it really helps you in that moment. But the drawback is that it can take a very long time. It can take days, hours, even longer to process that moment. So
yeah, I have to work on this shit with my therapist. That's why
Absolutely.
Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I wanted to get back onto something you also said about some of the comments that Trump said and RFK around, I believe it's when you were doing your RFK voice, around at about 2 years old, they had all these people that didn't have autism and now do.
The vaccine angle, yeah.
Right, that's the vaccine angle. But what is that? Why is that? Well, it's at about 2 years old where you start to really develop your psychosocial abilities and your social interaction abilities, and where you start to differentiate and be able to see how someone might not be communicating in a way that your younger child who you had before was communicating at that time. And so before that, there are definitely signals, there are definitely things to help diagnose, but it's at about 2 where it really you're able to tease it out.
So yeah, all pre-2-year-olds generally don't, they're not communicating at an advanced level, and once you should be sort of is when you start to notice these things. But then also that corresponds with about time people are getting their like normal vaccine schedule, and so that's why I think a lot of folks conflate the two.
And so we see all the time mothers, fathers who are devastated, and you have to feel for them and you have to meet them where they are, that vaccines cause my son, my daughter's autism, right? And what they're seeing is, okay, They got all these bunch of vaccines, and then all of a sudden it got to that time of life where I noticed that they had autism or they got diagnosed with it. And it's a temporal relationship, not a causative relationship. And so this idea of what is associated and what is causation is something that is very hard to understand when you have an N of one, when you have a population of one, when it's you and your child. And you have to empathize with that, because that is an extremely hard thing to go through, to see that. And we see that in 1,000 different ways of, I took Tylenol and now, and I got diarrhea from it, right? I shouldn't I'm not going to take Tylenol anymore. You hear stuff like that all the time, right? But you're like, no, you didn't, have a belly pain because of your Tylenol. You just happened to get belly pain that day. Yeah. You ate something bad.
I wanted to point something out about what he's talking about with younger kids around too. That even if you see things so a couple of my children that I very much suspect are on the spectrum, and one that has confirmed that, I remember things when they were like 2 or 3. I remember behavior changing. I remember with one of my children, they were into something and like trying to correct them and move them away from that. And like they understood me, but it was like there was something in them like that was making him still do that, or her still do that. And it was quite interesting. It stuck in my head. And I remember with another child right around 2, 3, she just completely changed from the sweetest girl. She got kicked out of daycare. And, we went a long time trying to figure out what, was going on. And there's just other things too, with like hearing and vision with my kids, things that I picked up on as a parent throughout the years and had sought medical care. And none of us still ever had any kind of, suspicion that we were on the spectrum at all. So.
Right. And I do want to point out, like Dr. Tim was saying, this is not causal. This is just temporal. These are the kind of things that happen at the same time. And any link between vaccines and autism has pretty well been debunked at this point. There was a study in 1998 in the UK, Dr. Andrew Wakefield. Yeah, and he's been completely discredited at this point. The article had to be retracted by the journal, and yet that sticks with a lot of people now, and that myth persists.
Well, we need to spend more time on vaping. Huh? I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I'm on a delay. I'm sorry. I keep interrupting. I'm on a delay.
Well, I was going to ask about the Tylenol angle, right? So, look, we know vaccines do not cause autism, period. What is with this Tylenol angle?
Yeah. So first of all, politicians don't belong in my exam room, and businesses don't belong in my exam room. Lawyers don't belong in my exam room. The only people in my exam room when medical decisions are being made are myself, the scientific community that I lean on, and the patient, and what their individual preferences are, what their lifestyle needs are, what their health needs are. Those are the people involved. And so Trump inserting himself into this conversation, especially because he can't even pronounce the word acetaminophen, which is one of the most common drugs that we have in our armamentarium to help people, is just completely inappropriate. It is way overstepping what a politician should be doing. And the medical community has pushed back hard on this. And it has been something that I've been waiting for the medical community to really step up hard to start pushing back against RFK and Trump. And we've seen a little bit of it over the last few months with vaccines, and especially this mRNA vaccine defunding that happened. Mm-hmm. But now this has just been a bright, red line that has been stepped over. And the American Medical Association made it very clear that they're pushing back. My medical association, ACEP, the American College of Emergency Physicians, ACOG, everybody literally just very loudly saying, nope, get the hell out of my room. Yep.
So let me ask about that. That's great that those independent organizations are pushing back, but the federal government issuing guidelines does come with a certain bit of cachet.
Right.
Do you fear, as I do, that any information that comes out of this administration is worthless at this point?
I don't know about any information, but what I would, yeah, I mean, even a clock is right twice a day. So let's talk about how we got here for a second. Okay, so to answer that question, there's been a systematic stripping of the scientific and medical influence within the FDA, the CDC, National Institutes of Health, and CMS, which is where Medicare and Medicaid and the Innovation Center is. And I would like to touch on that specifically for a moment, in a moment, because that is the part that is less in the conscious of the public. They think about medicine around CDC and FDA more than anything.
Yeah.
And so people have been removed, scientists have been removed, representatives from the AMA have been removed, doctors have been removed. The CDC's chief medical officer, someone I know, just stepped down because of the firing of their director. These people who had influence. And then mostly, specifically, this has been done around vaccines. And so the panel that says what vaccines should be given, what the schedule, etc., people have been fired and replaced, and sycophants of Trump and RFK have been put into place. The most important one for me was that the people, the committee of scientists and doctors and experts who say what should be covered and paid for by Medicare or not has been fired and replaced. And so what that's done is we just recently seen that said we're not going to pay for vaccines for the COVID vaccine for people under 65, right?
Right.
We're just not going to do it. And we're not going to pay for it. What that does is strips the market for that vaccine away. And if there's no market, who's going to make it? And then what will happen? The price of it will skyrocket. And the only people that will be able to get it are the wealthy, once again. And so that is the most subversive thing that's happened in this whole system. And that's where we've gotten. And because of all that removal of scientific pushback within these organizations, we've gotten to a point that Trump can get on stage and talk about Tylenol, and there's no one there to stop him.
Yeah, well, a couple things there, actually, and thanks for bringing this up. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services is now run by Dr. Oz, and Dr. Oz is an investor in I would pronounce it iHerb, but it's iHerb with an H, a California supplement retailer that sells folinic acid. The supplement found in leucovorin, which is a compound that they are now saying may be used to treat autism in certain cases. Now, it's unclear how much of the shares Oz still owns. He said he would divest his holdings in this company within 90 days of being confirmed, but then in another disclosure, he indicated that he might keep some until the company goes public. It sounds like, right, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show with IEDC. It sounds like a conflict of interest where he stands to potentially profit from this. Likewise, I mean, what's to stop anybody in the Trump administration from investing in like Advil before they all go out and like shit on Tylenol? You know, I mean, we've seen them engage in insider trading in this administration before. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting into a big can of worms there about insider trading, which is completely illegal for congressional people, which is completely illegal for in many ways for the executive branch, and even for the Supreme Court if they really wanted to, they just have to disclose it. Doesn't mean that they can't do it. And so those are laws that need to be changed. immediately, and that has a lot to do with just election reform in general. And once you get into Congress, what you're able to do and what you're not.
So we've only got a
Corruption.
couple minutes left here. I want to
Yeah.
make sure that all of you who are far more knowledgeable on this topic than I have a chance to say some closing words on this topic. I'm gonna come to you, Leslie, because I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, for me, it's stop terrorizing women, really. I mean, I think that's what a lot of it is. And support families who have children with special needs. Value people with special needs, stop stigmatizing them. Like Jennifer said, there are many amazing people with autism who are highly functional, who have jobs and families of their own, and throughout history have made important contributions. But even though my son is nonverbal and, he has right hemiplegia as the result of his stroke, he's still a pretty happy guy. And, I was just sitting on the sofa with him before we started, and, he was just smiling at me. And I was talking to my husband just about what a joy it is. We have to find the joy where we have it. And in a caring, kind country, families who have children with special needs would be getting the support they need. It wouldn't be like the Hunger Games where we're all fighting for help from the government. The government would be automatically giving that help. It wouldn't be trying to make people feel guilty and terrible about what's going on in their lives. And I don't think that all this chaos is going to elevate the birth rate. These same people seem to be so obsessed with the birth rate in the country. I mean, who wants to have a baby if they're going to, just be hating on everybody and every policy? I mean, enough is enough. We all need to stand together. I'm so glad that the medical community is standing up. I really am. There's full of brilliant people who have financial resources, who have skills beyond medicine, and they need to stand together. I mean, we all need to stand together because, they just keep turning us all into targets, and it is ridiculous. It's just not where we need to be in 2025. No.
Seriously.
do-
Jennifer, yeah, what do you got?
I just want to add, as we're talking about this, and as you are mentioning, there's a lot of people that, really excel in medicine, just different things. And that people with autism, they need to be really careful about how they allow other people to use them, especially with leaders and people that are trying to argue either side of this, that we can be very much taken advantage of. We really think that people have our best interests at heart. And I know personally this has happened to me. So that is just something, as we talk about this more and more people are realizing that they are autistic, they probably have a lot of similar stories. So.
Yeah. Dr. Tim, what did I miss?
I took an oath, and my oath was to protect patients and do right by patients and leave out all of the noise of politics when taking care of them. So I just want to talk to people as patients for a second, and your listeners, Scott, which is Tylenol is an incredibly important drug to what we do in medicine. It's an important drug for pregnant women, especially because you can't take ibuprofen or Advil, one and the same, Motrin, also the same, or any medication related to those drugs like Aleve. You cannot take those in pregnancy. And I need to say that because already have seen patients come in who say, why don't I just take Tylenol? Why don't I just take ibuprofen if I can't take Tylenol? Let me just use the alternative. Ibuprofen causes low amniotic fluid, which causes things like lungs to not develop in the fetus, as well as gastroschisis, which is when the stomach and intestines come out of the abdominal wall and twist around and kill. It causes kidney failure in fetuses. It blocks the prostaglandins that are needed to maintain a pregnancy in your body. It causes cleft palates, heart defects, etc. Do not take ibuprofen. And it's one of these moments of like, oh my God, I'd like have to go back. I have to prove myself when I say don't take ibuprofen to a patient instead of ibuprofen's really bad for you as a pregnant person. Please take Tylenol. Now, when it comes to Tylenol, don't take a lot of it. Let me also say that to people who are indignant against Trump, right, in various ways. I've also seen people like, it's candy,
I'm
let
gonna
me
take
take
more
it.
to piss him off.
Exactly. It's not that bad. I can take as much as I want. And you see people not knowing that there's dangers to Tylenol when it comes to overdose. And there are both chronic overdose as well as acute overdose. So you can't take more than 4 grams or 4,000 milligrams of Tylenol a day. Do not do that. That brings it to a place where you're now starting to put your liver in danger. Don't take more than 2 grams, which is 2,000 milligrams. 4 500 milligram pills. Usually they're in 500s or 650s. Don't take more than 4 of those a day, over 2 grams on a chronic basis if you have chronic pain, because you will put your liver at danger. And when I say your liver at danger, I mean your liver will go into full hepatic failure and you'll lose its ability to take the toxins out of your blood, and death is the next thing after that. So don't take this as candy as well. There are so many things to think about, even with Tylenol, and we think about them as doctors when we say, please take Tylenol. We don't just say like, take Tylenol, take ibuprofen, no big deal, right? There are 1,000 things to think of, and that's why I went through 14 years of school to be able to talk to you about this today and treat many patients. And so politicians, whatever they say, do not have, even if they have your best interest in mind, even if they have their best interest in mind, they don't have the training, they don't have the ability to come and tell you what you should be taking or not. Please listen to your doctor. Please listen to your doctor and make a decision with them. Take the politics out of it.
Thanks, Dr. Tim. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up for today. Why don't our folks also listen to our doctor, tell them where they can find him and more about him?
Sure. Well, running for U.S. Congress here in District 9 in Southeast Indiana, ran last year and was the Democratic candidate. This has always been a long race, a lot of work to get here, and we built a pretty great movement right now. 650 volunteers knocking on thousands of doors. And please join us at timpeckforcongress.com. I'm also here as the co-founder of Project Next Media, which we do a collaboration with Scott, and it is published on our platforms. And so Project Next is taking the fear and hate out of our society as much as possible by giving the facts and thinking about how to hear even more voices that are local and understand how all of these issues that we talk about sometimes on a higher level really affect people on a more local level. One of the shows that we have is the Dr. Tim Show tomorrow, actually setting up a show. It'll be at 5 o'clock, in which we're speaking with Dr. Carrie Rouse, who is the foremost OBGYN in Indiana for sure when it comes to issues surrounding those that bump up against policy and politics. She's really largely responsible for holding the state house in check and making sure that there were carve-outs in the very draconian abortion law that we have. At least there were some carve-outs that had some medical, logical necessities in there. So she'll be on tomorrow, along with one of her residents, who's a maternal fetal medicine resident, which is like advanced OBGYN kind of medicine, who did a huge report and research on Tylenol recently. So we have her coming on to support us. So that'll be at 5 o'clock tomorrow, and you can find that at any of our socials on Project Next Indiana, Project Next Media, including projectnextindiana.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Tim. And thank you for the platform. I appreciate having a place where we can have these conversations. Leslie, where can the good folks find you?
You can find me on my website, leslienuss.com. I am on Blue Sky, Nuss for Us. I'm on Facebook, Nuss for Us also. And I do have some videos on YouTube. You can just search under my name and they'll pop up. And my album it's going to come out November 7th, 11/7. It's a lucky number. So
congratulations.
Awesome.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to that. Excellent. Finally, Jennifer David, last word goes to you.
Last word goes to me. You can find me on Facebook is where I do most of my stuff, and I've got links there. Jennifer David. There's also Jennifer David for Hoosiers. I also am the president and founder of the Kimberly Renee Foundation, which our focus is really about educating people about autism, female autism. I'm going to be doing a lot with that, and male autism as well. And I'm also very excited. I am expanding a disability lifestyle and resource magazine in Southern Indiana. It's going to be the Louisville area, and then Clark, Scott, Floyd, Washington, and Harrison counties. And that magazine is called Uniquely You. And this is going to be a great opportunity for me to share and talk about a lot of things that we've talked about today. So look forward to that.
Very good. Looking forward to seeing that too. Great. So, hey, thanks to all of you for joining me today. Thanks to Dr. Michael Shaffer too. He had to run, and Dr. Tim tagged in, so don't want to leave him hanging there. Anyway, until next week, I will look forward to seeing you then. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. This has been Who's Left This Week. Love each other, Indiana.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.